Welcome to Practical Changemakers, a carbon positive story. I'd like to acknowledge that we're broadcasting to you today on Wajak Noongar and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Louise and I'm the CEO of Carbon Positive Australia. Our mission is to empower and encourage everyone in Australia to take action that revitalises and improves the health of landscapes and communities. We do this by our carefully selected Australian tree planting projects and by providing inspiring education programs. We plant trees to offset carbon emissions, connect communities and encourage everyone to make climate healthy choices that go beyond being carbon neutral. Our planting benefits nature, community and the wider well-being of our regions. Through our work, we get to talk to and spend time with people who are working for the health of our environment every single day. These practical change makers and leaders don't often make the headlines, but the work that they do is vital in our changing world. It's my pleasure to introduce some of them to you and for you to hear more about their work, to be inspired and to find out ways you can become a practical change maker too. So my guests today are Maryline Cassou, I hope I've said that correctly, and she is the founder of KITO Plastics Proprietary Limited and Precious Plastic Perth, an impact manager at Metis and a business developer for the Hub on Essex. So a truly global citizen, Maryline has worked and travelled the world for 20 years before founding her startup company, KITO Plastics in Australia. With a special interest in sustainability and circular economy, she's guided by her personal beliefs and inspired by the quote, "Waste is a design flaw." And I'm going to ask her a little bit more about that in a moment. She's putting everything she knows into innovating in this space with KITO Plastics, as well as founding the Precious Plastics Perth Community Engagement Project. Welcome, Maryline.
Hi, hello, thank you.
And I also have with me Sharka. Sharka is a passionate waste warrior, and I can definitely confirm that that is the case. He started her business, Donut Waste, out of a need to do something tangible to reduce the environmental impact our behaviour is having on the planet. Donut Waste is a social enterprise that helps prevent organic matter, such as coffee grounds and food waste, from going into landfill. It does this by providing bin collections and sustainability consultancy to cafes and hospitality venues across Perth. Welcome, Sharka.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I'm absolutely delighted to have both of these ladies with me because I've met both of them at various sustainability events over the past year or so, and they've always got some amazing things to talk about. And I know that as listeners, you'll be truly fascinated by the work that they're doing. And also very encouraged as well to find out that there's this much sustainable work happening in Perth. So, Maryline, I'm going to start with you. Just tell us a little bit about your journey and why KITO Waste and why you do what you do.
Yes, hi. Well, initially I used to be a worker in the oil and gas industry, actually, and that's why I'm here in Australia. I arrived working for the oil and gas industry. And randomly about 3 years ago now, I think, I can't remember the date, but about 3 years ago, I went for a community tour of the RRC's facilities in Canning Vale. So that's basically the facilities where the yellow bin truck goes. Yes. So I just called them and just asked, and they are actually providing free tours. So I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to join. I want to understand where my yellow bin goes. And that's where my journey started. That's when I realized that actually everything that I put in my bin was not going anywhere where I thought it was going. So the content of the yellow bin was not recycled. And I thought, this is what I need to do. I need to work on this. I'm a fairly well educated person. I had no idea what was happening after you put things in the bin.
And I imagine a lot of our listeners will be in the same position of thinking, yep, it's gone in that bin and it's off to recycling it goes. But that's not the case then.
No, it wasn't. And that's when I started Precious Plastic Perth, where I thought, well, obviously at the time, the biggest issue I thought was around plastics. And I thought, well, I would like people to get more awareness and education around the topic. And that's when I started Precious Plastic Perth. And following that, so Precious Plastic is a community education project aiming to change people's behavior with their plastic consumption. But then I also thought, well, changing the community behaviors will take 5 to 10 years at least, and the problem is urgent. So I also founded KITO Plastics a couple of years ago now.
So what does KITO Plastics actually do?
So KITO is KITO. It stands for Keep It On Shore. Basically, I'm really passionate about the concept of circular economy, and I realized that whatever plastics we were managing to collect and sort and also recycle to an extent was then all shipped overseas because we didn't have a market for that recycled material. So I really felt I needed a project that would create that plastic circular economy in Western Australia. Part of the reason why we had to export all of our waste and recycled material, it's also, first of all, because we don't have sufficient facilities, but also because we were lacking expertise in that field. Okay. So I actually, brought in that expertise and started KITO Plastics.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Sharka, I'm going to move to you now, because if you tell us a bit about what you do, and particularly about donut waste, because I just love the concept of the donut, because we're going to talk about circular, and the donut's definitely circular. So
that's definitely one of the reasons for the name, which most people don't get. Most people get the connection to the donut as a food. Yep. So that was another reason, because I am passionate mostly about food waste. That was my number one, I think, waste. I've kind of realized when I came to Australia that I grew up a bit differently. I grew up where we didn't have abundance of food, and my mom wasn't really the richest. So there was no wasting food because we didn't have that much of it. And then I got here and I worked in hospitality for a while, as we all do when we arrive. And I saw the amount of food waste happening in like certain venues where we were not even allowed to take them home. We had to throw it away in the bin. Wow. And I was just disheartened. I just couldn't understand what's happening. So I think that was like a gradual journey for me, because I wasn't really working in waste, but over the couple of years, I just got more and more interested, and I started by reading our waste strategy one day when we went on holidays, and then somehow the universe heard the sign and I lost my job, and I was like, okay, now I think it's time to get into waste. And I didn't start with food waste. I was actually working for electronic waste recycling here for 2.5 years.
Okay. Yep.
Then I also went to work for local council, to learn about, exactly as Maryline said, what happens to our waste. And after that, I just felt, okay, it's time that I do some change. So I just wanted to have like a tangible thing to do, because I felt I'm kind of powerless in just educating people. And that was what I was doing with council. And it's great. I think we need definitely more education, but I just also felt like no one's really looking after the venues. No one's making them do the change. So I just went on and started Donut Waste. And I accidentally bought a big van because our mechanic had it. And then I bought some bins. And then I just started approaching cafes and asking them, what do you do with your coffee grounds? Because we all know that we're really obsessed with coffee here in Perth.
We certainly are, aren't we? We can't do without our morning coffees.
Coffee. Yeah, that's right. And that's why I was like, okay. And when I found how much coffee grounds actually gets created every single day, and we don't really think about it. We get our coffee fix and then we're like, oh, okay, that's it. But each time you have a coffee, you create waste. You actually have coffee grounds left behind you, and you don't really know or care about what's happening to it. So I found out that some cafes here in Perth are capable of producing a whole 120-litre bin of coffee grounds. Some of them have, some of them have bin a day. Some of them produce bin a week. Some of them every fortnight. So I just started offering them my services. So I give them a free bin, and then I collect it when they're ready. So they let me know, and I just go and pick it up. And I know you're about to ask what I do with the coffee grounds.
What happens to the coffee grounds when you pick them up?
That is the number one question I get right after, if I have some donuts for people.
Yeah.
I do take them to community gardens and just try to distribute them for compost. So this is one of the best ways to actually utilize coffee grounds. They're great in compost. They're really rich in potassium, calcium, and all other vitamins for the soil. And here in Australia, we have one of the most depleted soils in the world. So we actually need to start putting nutrition back in the ground, so we can keep growing vegetables that they have some nutrients in them. And food waste, it's one of the really big things that we waste, because we could make a beautiful soil out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Composting. So I've heard people use them in worm farms as well. Is that?
Worms love them. Yeah. They don't get high as we do after the caffeine, but they love it. Maybe they do. I don't know.
So both of you, in what you've talked about, and whoever wants to hop in first, please, what do you mean by either circular community or circular economy? What does that actually mean, and how does what you do fit into that concept?
Shall I start? Yes.
Maryline,
okay. So in my case, I'm a passionate person about the concept of circular economy. And what I find working in the plastic and the recycling industry is that for many, many people, the idea of circular economy is just recycling. And that's not it. That's absolutely not what it is. The idea, the first concept within circular economy is to avoid waste in the first place, to design our products and consume in a way that we are not going to generate waste. And this is really my mission with a recycling project, to tell people circular economy is not recycling.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think also adding to it, the donut economy has got to do with going back to local. So not going crazy about flying pineapples across the world when it just costs us too much carbon emission. It's not in season. We can't afford to do so. We can just eat locally. We can go back to having a milkman where we recycle the bottle, or better yet, reuse the milk bottle, which is made out of glass, ideally. So just going back to the local behaviors we've had before in past. So using local ingredients and going to our local farmers so they don't struggle to sell their produce. And we eat fresh and in season, which is good for us as humans as well.
Yeah. And I think, a Carbon Positive Australia, when people are using our calculator, that's one of the things to kind of think about is, how far do you travel to do things, and how far is your food coming from? Because obviously that makes a big difference to the amount of carbon that you're emitting into the atmosphere. So I think, for a lot of our listeners, it's going to be some I know that they would love to understand some really simple ways that they can kind of get to that. How can they think about becoming more zero waste in their lifestyle? What's some kind of easy hints and tips for them to sort of begin that process?
I would say to always keep in your mind the idea of avoidance. So always ask yourself the question, do I actually need that? Yep. Or is it just because it's there and I feel that I can have it? That's the first thing, avoidance. And then also obviously, packaging, trying to find alternative to plastic single-use packaging is a huge, it's a huge thing to do, because if you look in your bin, the amount of single-use packaging you will have is enormous, I think. So that would be the really too easy fix. And eventually, if you are a little bit curious and you want to do more, then I think understanding the concept of a product life cycle, understanding that what you put in your bin, it's waste is not just what you put in your bin. It's a lot more than that. It's all the natural resources that are required to do the product that will end up in your bin. Yeah. Once you understand that,
the people's time, all of that together.
Yeah, the logistics of it, the labor associated with that product, the energy required to produce that product. Once you really start looking a little bit deeper into the product that you've got in your hand or in front of you when you're at the supermarket, really quickly, then you will decide if yes or no you need that.
And it's like, Sharka, is there any easy ways, that you can, when you're looking, I know there's a decision, yes or no, shall I have it, shall I not have it? But are there any sort of particular types of product choices that you can make in terms of waste?
Absolutely, yeah. I would just add to, one of the simplest things to learn is actually check with your councils. There are so many free options to go and learn about how to recycle, how to do reusable nappies and all that. But definitely there are choices we can make when we go shopping, and which I make as well. There are packaging that we cannot recycle or no one can recycle them, like Tetra Pak. Let's just start with the name shaming. Like, that is something that nobody can recycle. There are only 2 factories in the world. And if you keep buying those, then just know they go straight to landfill and there is no option for them. So you can make the choice of looking at, can I buy a packaging that can be recycled? And we know that glass is something you can even reuse. So looking at those options, which I know it's easier to carry plastic, it's cheaper, it's also not as heavy, but just making those choices. So for me, I do not drink normal cow milk. I drink coconut milk a lot. So I buy it in tin, for example, because tin I know that can be recycled. Metal is one of the easiest things to recycle. So yeah, I think looking at those choices, and from food waste perspective, for example, just making a shopping list. And I think we all know that food waste does happen. It is inevitable. For example, like this morning, I found one of my mandarins just gone off because she was touching and hiding with the banana. So now she had a little issue. So it just happens to the best of us. But the biggest food waste we do is by overbuying, buying stuff that we don't need, and then we don't see it in a fridge. So it goes to waste because we didn't have the time or the resources to just use that food up. So shopping less, more often, more fresh, and then knowing how to store that food, especially fruit and vegetables. For example, storing them separately really makes the vegetables last longer. Storing them appropriately, not in plastic, but maybe in a wet towel for lettuce, for example, makes it last much longer. So learning all those sorts of things, which you can now find online anywhere, and it's free, accessible information out there that you can find if you're interested in that type of waste. But start with what really interests you the most. Start with whatever floats your boat. If you're really passionate about plastic, learn how to reduce your plastic packaging. If you're passionate about food waste, look into how to reduce your food waste.
Yeah, and I think from a personal perspective, I live on my own during the week, and when I go to the supermarket, quite often the things are already pre-packaged into, and so you're almost automatically building food waste in, because if I buy one of those packets, I know I can't possibly eat all 4 or 5 before the end of the week, before they go off.
Exactly,
so, yeah.
But you can learn how to store those. You can like, for example, bread and bakery goods are one of the number 1 things we waste. So just having the habit or learning the habit of chucking the bread in a freezer before it goes moldy, it's really easy thing to do. And then you just have it in a freezer, put in your toaster, and it's right there. So. And you also don't waste money. That's really good motivator for people. You're not going to spend that much money on food if you not waste that much money.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing, isn't it? If you're wasting, you're wasting your own resources as well, aren't you? Waste involves you as an individual. So I mean, going back to how things are packaged, and I just want to, what's the difference between degradable and biodegradable? It's kind of one of those questions that I've been asked to ask, actually, by one of our team. So what is the difference?
Do you want to go there?
I can try.
I'll help you.
I think it's actually it's really confusing, definitely. But what we need to keep in mind as well, it's not just degradable or biodegradable, but compostable as well, and how compostable. So degradable, everything is degradable.
Okay.
Everything, every product that you own, eventually at some stage will degrade. Biodegradable actually means that it degrades will
return to the nature.
Yes. Yeah. And compostable means that it creates a natural resource as well. The issue with compostable is that many things are not compostable by themselves in your home compost. So only organics, of course, only food is compostable in your home compost. A lot of what we call bio plastics or bio packagings are not actually compostable at home.
They need a special composting facility, and they need much higher temperatures, much longer time to actually break down. And every single one of those items needs a different time, different temperatures, and there is no regulation really telling you, unless they are certified and accredited, commercially compostable, then nobody really knows how long it's going to take. So that's why those facilities, not all of them accept them. because it's really difficult to find out what they are made of. So I think we have to take a step back, not only change the naming and the names for the biodegradable, oxo-biodegradable, so people are not confused with it, but also change how we let people produce that. It comes back to the circular economy. We need to design things that they are actually compostable or recyclable the way we can do it right now. So letting people just to name everything biodegradable, it's something called greenwashing. So people just feel good about themselves, but then commonly what occurs is that people think it's plastic because the bioplastic looks like plastic. So they put into the recycling bin, which creates contamination and costs us more money to actually remove it from the recycling bin and the process.
And it's just confusion, isn't it? I think, you can be quite overwhelming, particularly if you're still in the supermarket and you're faced with maybe all of these different types of bin liners, for example. And you look and you think it's very hard to choose because the one that looks perhaps the most biodegradable quite often isn't in terms of its packaging compared to the one that is. I know a lot of councils provide compostable, certainly in my area where I live, they provide like compostable.
FOGO, food organics, co-organics, new bins. That's a system that's been rolled out, or it has been still rolling out in some councils. I don't have it in mind, but I'm sure Maryline does.
Yeah, I do actually. I live in Fremantle and we have the FOGO system. Look, it's definitely a great help, I think, because it will help people understand their waste a little bit more and sort it. Really, the problem that we have at the moment with recycling waste comes from separation initially. So separation has two issues. One is the contamination within your bins, and two is the complexity of product. So sometimes it's just not possible. Like you gave Sharka earlier on the example of Tetra Paks. Tetra Paks is not recyclable here because of the complexity of the packaging and the different layers that are in the packaging. Some Tetra Paks are actually biodegradable, but here again, because of the difference in many different layers, it will be really difficult. So yes, we need huge amount of education and support from local government to understand all of these issues.
And again, with the provided bins, they're great, but they are not really supporting the avoidance of the waste. It is amazing that we actually utilize that waste, food waste, in a certain compost that actually goes somewhere and is utilized, because up to 50% of your landfill general waste bin at home from households is actually organic waste. So it's really great that we do remove that and we actually utilize it. So it's definitely a great way to move forward, but there is a lot of issues in WA, starting with the way we spread out. It's a lot of traveling, a lot of miles we have to go to those facilities that we are starting to build. So start your own compost. Ask council. There is a lot of free composting workshops, and go and then just chucking compost into your backyard. It's the easiest way to deal with your food waste.
And you get a great backyard as a result as well, don't you?
Yeah, and you get your own fertilizer. You can just grow your veggies out of your own food waste. Amazing.
And you understand the volumes of food waste that you've got in your own.
Yep, you see what you create. And if you don't have the option, there is a app called Share Waste. Just download it on your phone and you can find your neighbors that might provide you with a composting bin, just like myself. I have one on the verge, so all my neighbors can bring their own food scraps and veggie scraps and put them in.
Yeah, because I imagine if you're living in an apartment or something like that, it might not be so easy to kind of have a compost.
You can have bokashi bin. That's
can you? Tell us about those.
Bokashi bins are really easy. Then actually, you can put everything in there, including cheese and bones. I don't know who wastes cheese, not me, but people who do, then they can use that. I know, it's crazy. So then definitely bokashi bin is an option, and you can just then you pretty much put anything in there, and there's a certain things you have to add to it, but it's pretty simple. And then at the end, you just need to find a place where you bury it. And again, most of the councils will provide you with those types of workshops. And if they don't, ask, they will.
Oh, okay. I think that's really good to know. I didn't know that councils actually provided workshops on composting. So
and they provide free bins as well in some cases.
And rebates, a lot of the councils would provide you with rebates on reusable nappies or composting solutions if you go to those workshops.
So at the beginning, you said waste is a design flaw, Maryline, and I was just really interested in that as a concept. Can you just explain a little bit more about what you mean by that statement?
Yes. Again, it comes back to the concept of circular economy, where ideally what we should be doing, it's designing product that will not generate waste. And this is where I think we are a little bit behind at the moment in Western Australia, because we are concentrating on the idea of recycling our waste rather than avoiding the waste, not by just not buying product, but by designing the product better. The idea of design to reduce waste is really big.
Yeah, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because if you've got a product and you've actually taken out those, food obviously is a simple one, isn't it? If you just provide the food as it is and don't wrap it up in plastic or whatever. But yeah, when you're taking sort of a more designed object and, quite often you have to get through 3 layers of plastic, don't you, just to get the thing out of the packet in the first place, which actually as a consumer could be quite annoying as well.
Yeah, and I think a really good example is electronic waste, which we've all learned that if your printer runs out of ink, then it's cheaper to buy the whole printer with it. So that's something that's gone really wrong because, electronic waste is one of those things that they have rare materials we used, and it's really difficult to actually extract them at the end of the product's life. But the way we actually sell those electronics and make them, they designed to fail. So that's something that's gone really wrong, because back in times, washing machine or televisions, they would last much, much longer than they do right now. And that's what we need to change. We need to move from that, not only from buying and renting and hiring things that we don't use on a daily basis. Like how often do you use your car? How often do you use a drill if you buy one, if you have one? So that's another concept, moving towards use and hire. And then also just making things that we can repair them. So there's another movement in Europe called Right to Repair. So people actually have the parts available for another 10 years, for example, which has already been put in place in UK, for example. So if you buy a washing machine and it breaks down in 9 years, they still have to have that spare part available for you.
In some countries as well, they have tax incentives when they bring their electronics or any product to be repaired, because then it generate less waste, so they can deduct that from their tax at the end of the year.
Yeah, because there is a cost, isn't there, in terms of landfill, or in terms of how much waste we're producing. There's a cost to the whole community of that
absolutely,
waste.
Absolutely. And that's why we put in place things like product stewardships. Like, for example, when you buy a computer here in Australia, you have already paid for the price of the recycling. There's something called National Television and Computer Recycling Scheme, which actually taxes the people who bring it into the country, and they have to pay into the scheme already. So you paid for the recycling, so you might as well take it somewhere where it's going to be recycled.
Right. I'm learning so much here, so I'm sure everyone who's listening is learning the same. And one of the things that we sort of quite often get asked as well is, there are some things we think that we can recycle, but actually we can't. What's some sort of common things that people automatically kind of put into their recycling bins, and that actually it's not recyclable at all, really?
Well, I can definitely tell you that from my waste education role. We know the number one contamination in our facilities is soft plastic. So soft plastic does not go to a yellow bin, and majority of people still put it there.
Yep.
It is, however, recyclable.
It is recyclable, absolutely, but not through a yellow bin. So you have to put it through a red cycle in your Coles and Woolies. There's a big bin that's collecting them, and there's a company over East that will be recycling it and making products out of it, which I'm sure Maryline could tell you much more about. I'm just going to finish off with 2 more products that people do put in there. And we've already mentioned it. Electronic waste is a big one. Any batteries, anything that could have battery or has a plug that's considered electronic waste at the end of its life, does not go to any bin. Not a red bin, not your yellow bin, not general waste bin. It has to go to a special place, because that's how we get fires. That's how the truck gets on fire and has to just get rid of the load. That's how our facilities get on fire. So do not put any electronic waste into any bins. Take it to your...
Good advice. Thank you.
Ask your council where to take it. So there are multiple places. Batteries can be collected in your community places, libraries, even in gyms. So just take your batteries there and make sure you don't put e-waste into your bins. And the last but not least, nappies, really good to mention, because nappies are still a big contamination in our yellow bins as well. So do not put your used nappies.
And I'll use again the example of the Tetra Pak that you gave earlier on. That's a huge contamination in the recycling. Tetra Paks are not recycled, so they go to the landfill bin.
So I suppose as well, if people are putting this in their bin, then does that mean that the whole waste in that bin is then contaminated and that it doesn't get recycled, or just that particular element?
No, I do not like telling people that things are not being recycled. Things are being recycled here, but it really is about how you understand what the recycling means. We are sorting country, so we do sort things, and then we quite often bale them and send them to others to recycle, which is now changing, by the way. But if you put a nappy into yellow bin with certain contents in it, and it goes all over the truck, it still be sorted in the facility. So it's not magical machines doing it. There are actually humans in something called MRF, the material recovery facility, and they will endeavor to go through it. They get all sorts of things from dead goats, just chainsaw in parts, and I've been there multiple times, and that's the stories we hear. So they will still definitely endeavor to recycle everything. But of course, if there was a newspaper, then you have contaminated that newspaper, and then that will go to landfill.
Right, understand. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I've certainly learned a lot today, and you tend to think that you know quite a bit until you talk to experts who actually know a lot more, and then you realise how little you actually do know. So it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you both today. If people want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
Oh, in my case, because I'm working on so many different projects, I would tell them to search me on LinkedIn. Yep. And then depending on their interest, then we can talk about one of the projects that I'm working on.
That sounds great. Thank you. And Sharka?
You can find us on donutwaste.com.au. You can also find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and just reach out and ask.
Thank you both so much. And if you're interested in Carbon Positive, you can find us at carbonpositiveaustralia.org.au. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.